Maybe this morning the sun rises and it's a beautiful day, and that's merciful. So all of those things, I think, are the things that we should dwell on. Those are the good things that we should dwell on instead of what we aren't getting. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible 365. So today's an easy one. We are doing the book of Lamentations. So guys, if you have never been here before, this is Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I am reading through the Bible in 1 year, so 365 days. I am using the chronological Bible reading plan, and that is available for free online at oneyearbibleonline.com. You would just have to go on there. You'd have to scroll through and search through and find their chronological reading plan, pull it up as a printable, download it, it's free, and then read it along with your Bible. So today we are on day 240. It is August 27th, and it's Lamentations 2 through 4. So I'm giving you your 2-minute history. I'm trying to keep it to 2 minutes every day, so then you'll know to fast forward and pick it back up at 2 if you've been here 100 times with me before. Okay, we are in the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel is God's people. He chose these people. He picked them up out of Egypt. He brought them into the land of Israel. Once they were in the land of Israel, they decided nothing was good enough. They wanted a king because everybody else had kings, and they wanted to be like everybody else. So the Lord gave them a king. When he gave them a king, they wound up splitting into two kingdoms: the northern kingdom, which is Israel, the southern kingdom, which is Judah. And they lived that way for a time. They had war against each other. They had war against other people. It was kind of an upheaval all the time in that area. The 12 tribes were really at that point never combined anymore after that. Then in about the 600s, the late 600s, like 680 to 700, the nation of Assyria came in and took over the nation of Israel. They took them as slaves. They brought them over into Assyria. They did not treat them well. They brought people over in to live in the nation of Israel and kind of take over that land. And it didn't go well for the nation of Israel. And then Judah was warned over and over and over again by prophets that it was going to happen to them if they didn't turn to the Lord. And then here we are, and we're in about 586, and they have also been taken over. They took over first most of the nation of Judah, and then they went in and they under siege the nation of Jerusalem, so that tiny city of Jerusalem. And then they took almost all of them out, brought them into the nation of Babylon. They are living as slaves there. It is not their home. And then they left in Jerusalem, and very few, most of them are poor, and they gave them vineyards and farms to work just so they can eat. It is famine there. It is not going well. Jeremiah was the prophet that was living there. He chose to stay in Jerusalem in order to dwell among his people. He didn't choose to go over into Babylon because he was actually given the choice by Nebuchadnezzar. And so he chose to stay in the nation of Jerusalem. And so he's there now, and it is just awful. And so he writes this book called Lamentations. Lamentations is a lament. A lament is really an outpouring of grief and sadness. And then this is a reminder it's sort of a shout out to all the people at the time, but it is also a reminder to the people after, because there is hope that in 70 years, the nation of Israel is going to be brought back over into Jerusalem, Judah, Israel, the entire area, and they are going to thrive. They are going to prosper again. They are going to follow the Lord. And so never forget. These are things that we even tell ourselves, like believer, not believer. There's that old saying that goes, those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it, right? And so it's why we remind ourselves all the time of all of these things that happen. Remember when this happened, it didn't go well with them. Remember when this happened, it didn't go well with them. And what do? We kind of go, well, that was them. We can do it better, right? Like we always have this foolish notion that we somehow can do it better than them. And the reality is we kind of always repeat history. And so this is a reminder to the people that are coming back. Do not repeat what happened. This is how awful it was. And so Jeremiah, again, I'm saying it's Jeremiah. As of right now, it doesn't say this is Jeremiah writing this book, right? There is an assumption because of the timing in which it's written. It's obviously written about when the nation was taken. And so there's an assumption that it is Jeremiah. Again, I'm saying it's an assumption. Maybe at the end we're going to see that he signs it, but as of right now, we don't know that. So all we're doing today is doing Lamentations 2 through 4. I don't want to dwell too much in it, but there are some things that I found to be interesting because, again, he's lamenting, he's complaining, he's sad. He says, how is it? So we're starting in verse 1. How the Lord has covered daughter Zion with his cloud of anger. So he's upset with Zion. And Zion, if you guys remember, has been sort of another name for the nation of Israel. And I always say that it is not, it's more like what he would consider maybe the perfect nation of Israel, that it's not the nation of Israel as they are, but in some ways he has called them Zion. So I think it's a promise that is meant to them, that Zion sort of is their future, right? This like perfect place. And so he says, so, but he's using it as Egypt. He has hurled down the splendor of Israel from heaven to earth. He has not remembered his footstool. So Israel is his footstool. It is the place where, this is the way I say it, it is the place where God was dwelling among the people, right? So it's the place where he was relaxing with them. Like he was just God with his people, just like back in Eden, right? Like just back in the beginning. He was dwelling with his people. They were his footstool. They were with him, right? And obviously at footstool too, they were lower than him, right? He was in the throne in heaven and his footstool was at his feet. So there are a couple places where we note footstool. And in First Chronicles 28:2, it says, it talks about his footstool. This is a lot of places, but it says heaven is his throne, right? And the earth is his footstool. And Isaiah 66:1. So the same thing. So again, if I'm on top of things, you're going to see those verses right here alongside, right where my hand is. You're going to see those verses. And so you just kind of get a heads up. Like he talks about the idea of a footstool often. It's not something he just says every once in a while. And he says he's hurled down the splendor of Israel. So he wanted Israel to be heaven on earth. That's his ultimate goal, is that they are his ambassadors. So what it looks like for them to live on the earth is what it would look like for everyone to live in the heavenly places with the Lord. That's where the Lord dwells, in the heavenly places. And so Israel was supposed to represent that on earth. And they haven't. And so he took them from this place where he lifted them up, and then he dropped them back down into the earth. And so now they are suffering with all of the rest of the people on the earth. And verse 3, it says, in fierce anger, he has cut off every horn of Israel. This also goes back to Old Testament. It goes back to Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, right? Where they had all the horns at the altars, right? That's where all the blood was poured down on the horns, right? That's sort of like the front. That's the top. That's the best, is the horn. And he says he's cut every horn, every best of anything off of Israel. And he's poured out his wrath like fire. The Lord is like an enemy. He has multiplied mourning and lamentation. In verse 6, it says, the Lord has made Zion forget her appointed festivals and her Sabbaths. So she is no longer having any joy. She is no longer remembering the Lord in a way that they kind of come together in celebration. She's not doing that anymore. And then I thought to myself, what would it be like? So the writer, Jeremiah, I'm going to just say Jeremiah. Jeremiah does remember, because if he didn't remember, he couldn't write it. So Jeremiah does remember, but he knows that the people around, they're not remembering. What would it be like to remember all those times and to know that the Lord had all of these festivals with his people? And then you look around and everyone now is starving and mourning. I feel like in some ways it would be worse. Like it's one thing when you don't know. And a friend of mine and myself were talking this morning about understanding or not understanding certain things, right? Like when is it bad enough that you're going to turn to the Lord? Like when you get to that point where you're like, I'm unhappy enough, or nothing seems right, like nothing seems to fit or work together, or like the promise is things are supposed to be good, so I turn to the Lord. But when you dwell in it so long, I think you don't realize what it would look like to be out of it. And so Jeremiah here is like, oh, we forgot the festivals, and they're kind of still in that maybe where they don't even know, like they just know that they live a life without that, with suffering and with sadness and with mourning and with, sadness. Okay. I lost the wind constantly turns my pages. And so then it moves on. It says, the Lord has rejected his altar and abandoned his sanctuary. Remember, that was the place where he lived. He abandoned the temple. And he says, and then they, the enemies, have raised a shout in the house of the Lord. They go in the house of the Lord and they raise a shout in the house of the Lord, basically because they're winning. And then the Lord determined to tear down the wall. He did not withhold his hand from destroying. And then it said he made ramparts and walls lament. So even the stuff was sad and lamenting because of this. Her king and her princes are exiled among the nations. The law is no more. There is this time, and this is different from some of the other times. They've been at war. Like, they had some bad times. David had some bad times. During the time of the judges, there was that was before David. During the time of the judges, there was some bad times where, like, they didn't seek the Lord, they turned away, and then, all the other nations started to rise up, and then they called out to the Lord. So there were some bad times. This is like a wiping out, right? Like a cleansing, more like what Noah did, where like everything needed to be cleansed to start afresh, like start new. And so these next generations, he goes, this is who I am. Your fathers forgot, but this is who I am. And let me show you what I did before your fathers, so you recognize who I am, so you want to turn to me. And then we have this section where it comes down to like in 10 and further into this, where I think it's that idea, and I was talking about it yesterday, that idea where Jeremiah seems to be talking both about the nation and about himself. So I think he is suffering as much as the nation is suffering. And so he's looking at it and watching it, but there's also that own personal suffering, because remember, he's living out what the nation is suffering. And so it says here, my eyes fail from weeping. I am in torment within. So he feels like he is being tormented. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed. They say to their mothers, where's bread and wine? So he's watching all of these things. He's watching them starve, and he's just in torment about it. And he says in verse 16, all of your enemies open their mouths and they scoff and they say, we have swallowed her up. So they're like so proud of themselves that they won against. And then in verse 18, it says, the hearts of the people cry out to the Lord. You walls of daughter Zion, let your tears flow like a river day and night. Give yourself no relief and your eyes no rest. So he wants them to be lamenting. He wants them to be mourning. He wants them to be calling out to the Lord. Because remember, that's the ultimate goal. The reason God did this is so that people will turn to him. That's his purpose, right? It's not just to punish them in vain. It's not just because he's irritated and he's like, I'm going to get them because they got me. That's never his purpose. His purpose ultimately is to have them turn back to him. And then it says, lift up your hands to him for the lives of your children. Look, Lord, and consider. So they're asking him, whom have you ever treated like this? Like, why are we getting treated like this? You haven't treated your enemies this bad. Because remember, I'm telling you, it's a whole reset. And he said, young and old lie together in the dust of the streets. My young men and young women have fallen by the sword, right? People are dying. People aren't eating. And it says, as you summon to a feast day, so you summoned against me terrors on all sides. Moving into Lamentations 3, it says, I am the man who has seen affliction. So again, this whole thing, I feel like Jeremiah is feeling this as well. I'm the man who has seen affliction. He says, verse 17, I've been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. I remember my affliction and my wandering, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. So all of this is happening around you, and his compassions never fail. So he's looking around and he sees this misery. He sees this torture. He sees this suffering. He knows it's from his people, but he sees all of it. And he says, his compassions never fail. They're not consumed. So he says the people aren't consumed because the Lord is still compassionate for us. So there's a couple of us left. So even though we're having hardships, even though we're not eating, even though the mother is suffering watching her kids die, there are still some of us left because of the Lord's compassion, because he hasn't consumed all of us. And this is one of those things where I always say, where I think we as the nation of followers right now, we have to kind of recognize this, because we live in such comfort. We live in such peace and harmony for almost, for reality, where we have a lot of good things, right? And I think we need to remember that even in those small moments, like the Lord is compassionate. So when and if we get sick or something happens to us or something happens to our family, right? We don't cry out, why God, why me? Right? We have to say the Lord has compassion because it wasn't everybody, right? He didn't take out all of us. And I know that probably feels harsh, and even saying it kind of sounds harsh. But I think there's something in our hearts that has to say, we don't deserve this. And I truly don't. I don't deserve all the compassion that he gives. If you make a checklist just today of my rights and wrongs, my rights do not outweigh my wrongs. My compassion, mercy, and love for other people don't outweigh the things that I want to do for myself. And so I know that I fall short every single day. And so the days that Lord doesn't come against me are the days where I'm like, he's got compassion and he's merciful every day. And then he says, his mercies are new every morning. And so the idea of his mercies being new every morning, maybe like this morning you have food and that's merciful. Maybe this morning the sun rises and it's a beautiful day and that's merciful. So all of those things I think are the things that we should dwell on. Those are the good things that we should dwell on instead of what we aren't getting. And so that's where I think that those ideas come in. And he said, it says to myself, I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I'm going to wait for him. So I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to wait for him, even though I know these things are really hard. The Lord is good to those who hope in him, to the one who seeks him. It's good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Let him offer his cheek to the one who would strike him, and let him be filled with disgrace. This is him talking about like the people. For no one is cast off by the Lord forever. He will not leave you. Remember, he said, you are my people. I'm not going to leave you. He is always going to be there. That doesn't mean we're always in perfect relationship with him. And the reason it doesn't mean we're not always in perfect relationship with him is because our end, because we so easily turn away from him. He's always waiting there. We are the ones who have to look and say, oh, I didn't realize that you were waiting there for me. I was looking this way. Right? I was so busy looking for myself that I forgot to look towards you. And so he's always there. No one is cast off by him forever. So yes, he's punishing them, but he's not going to keep them there forever. And it says in verse 33, for he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone. He doesn't do this because he wants to. He's not doing this because it's his first choice. He's doing this to turn them back. 38, is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come? Why should the living complain when punished for their sins? Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. This is forever. I think this is universal to everyone. Yes, he's talking to Israel. Yes, he's because they are being punished. But guys, this is for everybody who follows. Let us examine our ways. Always be examining. Always be turning back to him. Always be repenting, right? And calling out to him. Verse 49, he says, my eyes will flow unceasingly without relief until the Lord looks down from heaven and sees. So he's going to keep lamenting and crying out for his people. You, Lord, took up my case. You redeemed my life. Lord, you have seen the wrong done to me. Uphold my cause. Again, I'm thinking this is both Jeremiah and it is the nation of Israel. He says, pay them, because everyone's making fun of him. Now it's time to pay them back. He's praying to pay those people back what they deserve, because for what their hands have done. Because right now it's the Lord that's punishing him, but it is also a people group that's punishing them. So he's like, pay them back. When we have sort of paid our due, our debt to you, pay them back for what they have done to us. Moving into this last chapter, chapter 4, he says, essentially, riches don't look rich anymore. Like nothing looks great. How the gold has lost its luster, right? Sacred gems are scattered, right? Nothing has joy anymore. Nothing looks as glorious as it once looked. He says, even jackals offer their breasts to nurse their young, but my people have become heartless. The punishment of my people is greater than that of Sodom. I feel like this chapter is a different thought. So I kind of feel like those first 3 chapters sort of summed up one of the thoughts that he was thinking. And now I feel like he's kind of coming back, and he's, in some ways, he's saying like, why so harsh? Why, like the first area, it was kind of like, we deserve this. We're so sorry. We love you. We turn to you. We're suffering really bad. And now it's kind of like, everything is awful. So maybe some time has passed and you sort of get more into that, like, how long are we going to be here? That's the way I say it. So he says, the punishment of my people is greater than Sodom. Essentially, Sodom got wiped out like that, right? Like, they were bad. God went and found out. Immediately when God found out, he blew up the whole area, complete destruction, nothing left, not even a crater, right? No one even knows where it is anymore. Here, it's slow, it's painful. They knew it was coming. They watched it come slowly, right? First, Israel was taken away. Then portions of Judah were taken away. Then Jerusalem was under siege. Then Jerusalem was taken away. Now they're all starving, right? Like, it was like this long, slow process. And he was like, those killed by the sword are better off than those who die of famine. The Lord has given full vent to his wrath. And then we go in verse 12. It says, the kings of the earth did not believe, nor did any of the people of the world, that enemies and foes could enter the gates of Jerusalem. Like, we were kind of proud and pompous. But it happened because of the sins of her prophets and the iniquities of her priests. So this is what your leaders messed up so badly. This is why everybody came in. And then it says in verse 15, go away, you are unclean. People are crying to the people of Israel. Away, away, don't touch us. When they flee and wander about, people say among the nations, they can't stay here anymore. Like, they're off. Get them away from us. We don't want them anywhere near us. The priests are shown no honor, the elders no favor. Moving down into the end of the section, in verse 21, it says, rejoice and be glad, daughter Edom, because Edom is part of the punishment. You who live in the land of Uz, but you also will drink the cup. The cup will be passed to you. You will be drunk and stripped naked. Your punishment will end, daughter Zion. He will not prolong your exile, but he will punish your sin, Edom, and expose your wickedness. So Israel, the promise is coming that you are going to come back. Edom, the promise is coming that you are going to be punished. Again, I feel like that's a little bit of a different thought, but weigh in. I'd love to hear from you guys. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Hopefully you stayed, and hopefully it's been a blessing. If it has, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And keep reading. I will see you guys next time.